What's up, everybody? I am Milan Jordan, and this is the MMA Daily Blitz brought to you by FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. Hey, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check out our YouTube page, and you can follow me on Twitter as well at Milan Jordan. All right, busy weekend around MMA as 2022 winds down. Friday night, Bellator 289 took place at the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut with the Bantamweight Grand Prix. Patchy Mix controlled the fight throughout and eventually put Magomedov to sleep in the second round with a guillotine choke. The first time that Magomedov has been finished in his 22-fight pro career. Mix advances to the Bantamweight Grand Prix final with a shot at the interim title in $1 million grand prize, where he will take on Rafian Stotts, who won and beat Danny Sabatello by split decision. Some weird scorecards here. Two judges scored at 48-47 for Stotts, while the third judge had Sabatello winning 50-45. Well, Stotts is currently the interim bantamweight champ and successfully defends the interim title for the first time with the win over Sabatello. The Bantamweight Grand Prix final is set to take place in early 2023, with the winner going on to fight current champion Sergio Pettis in a title unification bout. Pettis was not able to compete in the Grand Prix when it started due to injury, but all indications are he is recovering well and will be ready to fight next year to unify the Bantamweight belt. The other title fight at Bellator 289 was a rematch for the Women's Flyweight Championship. Liz Carmouche retained the title in a mostly uneventful fight before submitting Juliana Velasquez with an armbar late in the second round. Carmouche controlled Velasquez against the fence for most of the fight, but didn't really mount much offense, much to the chagrin of the crowd in attendance, who voiced their displeasure throughout the fight. Carmouche saw an opening late in the second round, and he was able to lock in the armbar, forcing Velasquez to tap. Now, after the fight, Carmouche made her pitch to Bellator to open a women's bantamweight division. Carmouche, who opened up the UFC women's bantamweight division in a title fight against Ronda Rousey, said she would be willing to move up from 125 to 135 if Bellator would have it. President Scott Coker said that the promotion is considering opening up a women's bantamweight division, and no surprise there, as Scott Coker, when he was running Strikeforce, really a pioneer with women's MMA, and really that's where Ronda Rousey, Misha Tate, Gina Carano, Cyborg fought. And remember, the UFC, Dana White said, this is many moons ago, many years ago, saying that they'll never have women's MMA and women's fights in the UFC. Well, once he saw how popular it was, and Dana White and the UFC wisely accepted women's MMA, women fighting in the UFC, and again, that's some of the baddest women on the planet are fighting right now in MMA, and so it doesn't surprise me that Scott Coker would be open-minded to adding another women's division in Bellator. Speaking of the UFC, though, their final pay-per-view of 2022 was this past Saturday with UFC 282 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It was headlined by an interim light heavyweight title fight between former champ Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev that ended up in a rare split draw. One judge had Blachowicz winning 48-47. Another gave the fight to Ankalaev 49-46, while the third judge scored the fight 47-47, hence the split draw. Ankalaev had more strikes, more significant strikes, got the only two takedowns of the fight, and had over 11 minutes of control time compared to 0 for Blachowicz. Ankalaev, like many people watching the fight, was shocked at the outcome. Even Jan Blachowicz admitted afterwards that he thought Magomed Ankalaev won the fight, but instead ends up being the fifth draw in UFC championship fight history. In the post-fight press conference, UFC Dana White, he didn't mince words. He called the main event terrible. And then he announced that former champ Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill will fight for the still vacant light heavyweight title belt at UFC 283 next month in Brazil. You may recall that Teixeira was originally slated to face then-champion Yuri Prochazka at UFC 282 before Prochazka pulled out due to injury that could sideline him for around a year or so. All right, down to the co-main event. It had popular fighter Paddy the Baddy Pimblett make his pay-per-view debut, and he beat Jared Gordon by unanimous decision. Gordon was a more effective striker in the first round, but One of the three judges still gave the round to Pimlet. Pimlet won the second round with good striking of his own. All three judges agreed with that. And then in the third round, Gordon scored a couple of takedowns, and Patty the Batty didn't do much of anything. Two judges gave the final round to Gordon. One somehow gave it to Pimlet. When all was said and done, though, it was Patty Pimlet winning the fight via unanimous decision, 29-28 in all three scorecards. And, a lot of people online, disagreeing with it, saying that maybe he shouldn't have won. But hey, that's how they judge it. And like, Dana White wisely said years ago, don't ever let it get to the judges' scorecards for that reason. But, looking at the fight stats, it shows it was a very close fight. Gordon landed 100 strikes compared to 97 for Pimlet, with Pimlet landing 63 significant strikes to 58 for Gordon. Gordon also landed the only 3 takedowns in the fight. He had 6 minutes, 28 seconds of control time compared to just 35 seconds for Pimlet, who was 0 for 3 on takedown attempts, but nonetheless with the win. Patty the Batty improves to 20-3 overall and a perfect 4-0 in the UFC, while the loss drops Jared Gordon to 19-6 overall, 7-5 in the UFC. Again, I wouldn't call it a robbery or anything like that. It was a close fight. To be honest with you, it could have gone either way. So that's what happens. It goes one way or the other, and it's not a huge, I think, discretion in that sense. But, All right, next up, Santiago Ponzinibbio was originally scheduled to fight Robbie Lawler, but Robbie Lawler pulled out late due to injury. So in comes Alex Morono as a late replacement, and this fight was a stand-up contest. Morono was in control for most of the fight with a nice mix of punches, combinations, and kicks. He won the first 2 rounds, but in round 3, Morono landed a punch that wobbled Ponzinibbio but couldn't finish. Well, Ponzinibbio recovers and then counters with a few shots of his own, capped off by a couple of rights that put Morono to the ground and ends the fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio, one of the great names in MMA, Santiago Ponzinibbio with the comeback victory via TKO at 2:29 of the third round. The rest of the main card, Dricus du Plessis fought former middleweight title contender Darren Till in a back and forth fight. In the third round, du Plessis got a takedown and then submitted Till with a rear naked choke as the South African continues his upward trajectory in the 185-pound division with a third round, again, rear naked choke win over Darren Till. Du Plessis improves to 4-0 in the UFC, 18-2 overall with 17 finishes out of those 18 fights. Meanwhile, Darren Till, he loses for the third straight time inside the octagon, and for the 5th time in his last 6 fights. He has only 1 win over the last 4 years. In the opener of the UFC 282 main card, Ilia Topuria over Bryce Mitchell with a second-round triangle choke. One note from the prelims, 18-year-old Raul Rosas Jr., who earned a UFC contract this past summer through Dana White's Contender Series, made his octagon debut as the youngest fighter in UFC history, and he certainly made the most of his octagon debut, earning a first-round rear naked choke of Jay Perrin at just 2:44 of the first round. Rosas recently just turned 18 years old and is a senior in high school. Again, Raul Rosas Jr., not only is he the youngest fighter in UFC history, he's also now obviously the youngest fighter to win a fight in UFC history. All right, this weekend, the UFC will hold its last event of the year with a UFC Fight Night card at the UFC Apex. The headliner is a matchup of top 10 middleweights, where third-ranked Jared Cannonier taking on number 7 Sean Strickland. Both fighters are coming off losses in their last fight. They're on the same card, UFC 277 in July. Cannonier lost to Israel Adesanya in the main event title fight, while Strickland was knocked out by Alex Pereira in the first round on that same card. You can watch the entire card, prelims and main card, on ESPN+. All right, quick update on some news we've been bringing you out through the last few weeks on the James Krause investigation into suspicious betting activity. The Nevada State Athletic Commission, they've extended the suspensions of James Krause and his fighter Derek Minner from Minner's UFC fight last month. The suspensions are pending further investigation and future disciplinary hearings. The NSAC suspensions are currently based on what the commission has deemed a lack of disclosure of a Minner injury on his pre-fight medical questionnaire prior to his November 5th fight against Shailan Nuradambieke in Las Vegas, and subsequently dramatic betting line movement in the hours before the fight. That's what caused the put up a red flag for everyone. Minner lost in the first round TKO after visibly demonstrating that he had an injured leg during the bout. The NSAC also said that the fact that both Krause and Minner are also being investigated by other bodies, probes that could lead to, quote, further violations. The FBI is also collecting information. So this story appears to be far, far from over. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for the MMA Daily Blitz. Again, please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Twitter at Milan Jordan. The MMA Daily Blitz has been brought to you by FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. Thanks once again for tuning in. Goodbye, everybody.